Some of you might remember that song as Summertime and the Living is Easy. That song came from a very important story in American history known as Porgy and Bess. Well, for those of you who don't know, it was a famous opera and movie back in the early years of this 20th century, but a lot of people don't know of the story that's behind it, which is equally important. Our story begins in this part of Charleston known as James Island, a rural section of the city back in the early 1900s. Around the year 1889, there was born a young man by the name of Samuel Smalls to John and Elvira Smalls. And he grew up with his stepfather, John Gibbs, would later refer to as Little Images of Feet, which was a euphemism of saying that he had polio. Well, because he was handicapped, he was not able to go to school or perform the particular jobs that were often done by young black men at the time. So around the year 1900, his family moved to Charleston. And he was known for going around on a goat cart. And he would go around the cart through the city. He would sell ginger cakes and things of that nature. And he would sing his favorite song, which was, "Give me that old-time religion, give me that old-time religion, give me that old-time religion, that's good enough for me," as he rode his goat cart through the streets of Charleston. Well, he was, in spite of his disability, he was very popular with the young ladies in Charleston. And one of his girlfriends was a young lady by the name of Maggie Barnes, who he was staying with at number 4 Romney Street in Charleston back in 1924. Well, in March of that year, Maggie Barnes allegedly stole his watch, or so he believed. And so he did something that was sort of interesting. He got a pistol, and then he went on his goat cart and chased Maggie Barnes through the street, shooting the pistol, pow, 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 as she ran behind him, and then right after him. And then afterwards, the police came by and, of course, arrested him for shooting this pistol in the streets. You know, he could have shot somebody. Well, anyway, the next day, the Charleston News and Courier had a headline that was be considered politically incorrect today. It said, "Cripple arrested for firing at woman." And it told the story of how Samuel Smalls went into his goat cart and chased Maggie Barnes down the street, shooting his pistol. And it added a rather sarcastic conclusion to the story, saying that being a poor marksman, the Barnes woman was unhurt. Well, anyway, this is a picture of Samuel Smalls. It's a rather poor quality photograph, as you can see. This was, here you go, here's a good look at it. It was taken by his sister. Sometime in the 1920s. As you can see, he's a rather average-looking chap. There he is, and you see that he isn't able to stand up in his full form. And there's his little hat and everything. Well, anyway, the next day after reading that story, there was a gentleman by the name of DuBose Heyward, who was a blue blood of Charleston. He had an ancestor who in fact signed the Declaration of Independence in the days of the American Revolution. Well, DuBose read that story of the young man. He said, "Hey, I know this guy." He remembered him from begging in the streets. And so, looking at this, he began to think about it. And he said, you know, it's something to consider. Here I am, this wealthy man of Charleston, and here's this young man growing up in poverty with a disability, and being a very poor African American at a time when that could really limit your aspirations in life. And he said, basically, there but for the grace of God go I. And so he wondered, what would it be like to live in such a fashion? So he sat down and wrote a story that was based on this young man and his life. And it became a novel called Porgy by DuBose Heyward, written in 1925. And as a matter of fact, he did mention Samuel Smalls in his story. Here in the introduction, he says, "To Smalls I make an obligation for my acknowledgement. From contemplation of his real and deeply moving tragedy sprang Porgy, a creature of my imagination." Something to think about. So anyway, after that, as many people know, Porgy and Bess became an opera that was co-written by the great writer George Gershwin, and it eventually became a motion picture with Sidney Poitier and Sammy Davis Jr. as Sport and Life. You see Sidney Poitier as Porgy in the back of the DVD case, and on the cover you see Dorothy Dandridge here as Bess, and Sammy Davis Jr. here as Sportin' Life, who was a drug-dealing character in the film. Well, Porgy himself, though, Samuel Smalls, after he was let out of jail, he eventually died a short time afterward, and the goat died a short time after that. And basically, his family remained in poverty for some time, but many of them are doing well for themselves. And in the year 2000, the town of James Island had a celebration for him and his family, including his grandniece Lorraine Moore, who sat and talked with me about many of these issues that I captured in my book, True Stories of Black South Carolina, that you can find in some bookstores and also on some websites. And one of the moving things about that ceremony was that Samuel Small's grandnephew, J.C. Delliston, got up and told the audience something that really makes you want to think. He said that if a man riding in a goat cart can inspire something that has captured the imagination of the world and brought so much joy and happiness through his music throughout the world, then what can we do? This is Damon Fordham on the story behind Porgy and Bess. Have a good day.